Pad do?
Gentlemen, on the hotline right now, this is Purple Daily live draft special on SKOR North. Phil Mackey, Judd Zolgad, Rami Maklov, and Matthew Collar. And we're pleased to be joined here by Gary Hahn, play-by-play man for North Carolina State, to tell us about Garrett Bradbury. We'd love a couple minutes for you to fill us in and Vikings fans in on what the Vikings just got at number 18, Gary. Thanks for joining us.
Well, you're very welcome. I think they're getting a really good football player. I mean, Garrett Bradbury was a 3-year starter at State, had about 38 career starts, I believe. He won the Remington Trophy as the best center in the country, first team All-ACC, Outland Trophy semifinalist, a kid that's very smart, athletic, extremely hard worker. He came to NC State as a 250-pound tight end. And thanks to Dan Burnett, the strength coach, and Garrett Bradbury being the kind of worker he is with a tremendous work ethic, made himself into the kind of player that he is now, first-round draft pick in the NFL. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, what's not to like about this young man?
Talking with Gary Hahn, the voice of NC State football, here on the Purple Daily live draft special after the Vikings select Garrett Bradbury, center out of NC State. I think sometimes demeanor and attitude is something that's overplayed in the sport of football, but I happen to think that in the trenches and with offensive linemen, it really matters. Does he have some nasty to him? What type of demeanor are we looking at with Garrett Bradbury?
Yeah, he's smart. He's got a high IQ, but you're right. He does have an attitude. He was the guy that the offensive line kind of gathered around. He was sort of the leader of the pack on the offensive line. State had a 1,000-yard rusher this year in Reggie Gillespie, and the year before, 2 NFL players. He blocked for them, Jalen Samuels with the Steelers and Naheem Hines. And so, this is a guy who has worked hard, and he's enjoying the fruits of all of that labor, because he's made himself into a really, really good football player just through sheer want-to and obviously some God-given ability, but a tremendous work ethic. And he does have some nasty to him, and this is a guy that wants to win at any cost.
Gary, can you tell us about the game against Clemson that everybody talked about, his tape, and then combining that with what he did at the Combine, pushing him up into being a first-round pick? But it seemed like that particular game pushed him over the top. What do you remember about that performance in the trenches?
Well, I'm usually following the ball. So,
that is true. That is true.
You probably better ask a coach about that. But I know one thing: Garrett Bradbury never surrendered a sack this entire year. Wow. And you guys obviously are following the draft. You know how good the defensive line was for the Clemson Tigers, and to be able to neutralize the people that he was able to block that day. I mean, that's pretty impressive, because State was going up against a professional defensive line that day. And Garrett Bradbury obviously graded out very, very well. And when you're up against that kind of competition and you're able to get your job done and do your job, which Garrett Bradbury did for 3 years and did it very well. And that's the other thing. Garrett Bradbury continued to get better each and every year. I mean, he just didn't take over as a sophomore and all of a sudden start to get some recognition. He really never got any recognition until this year. And when you win the Remington Trophy, I'll tell you what, you've done something, and I think that says a lot.
Smart kid too.
Yeah, real smart. Has a high football IQ. I think academically he was one of the better students on the team as well. But I'm not exactly sure about that. But in his interviews with media and in his dealings with the people that like us that follow the team all the time, I mean, Garrett Bradbury was one of the top interview subjects. I mean, you always knew you were going to get something really good, and he would answer your questions. He wasn't trying to dodge anything. He would look you in the eye and give you a good answer. That's what the media people want. So he also has that going for him.
Well, listen, Gary, we won't keep you here. We just really appreciate your insight. That's Gary Hahn. He is the voice of North Carolina State football, and Garrett Bradbury is the newest addition to the Minnesota Vikings. Thank you so much for your time here, Gary. We really appreciate it.
You are very welcome. You're getting a good football player.
All right. Right on.
Thanks, Gary.
That's good insight. Sorry.
But still, thank Gary.
Were you
Thanks, Gare.
you gonna ask him for lunch later?
Gary.
Are you getting
I
punched?
just thought I thought we were like
What's going
I thought
on
we were
here?
all gonna be like, thanks, Gary. Like, there's a lot of us here.
We all have to say bye to him.
And
Bye,
then-
Gary.
I thought Phil spoke for us all.
Like Little House on the Prairie, we were all going to say goodnight. What
Kiss on the cheek, caller.
Great night.
Rami, that's the Waltons.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Hey,
Night, John Boy. Night, Gary.
Manny, can you give Collar Gary's number so you can text him good night later on here?
I'll pass it along to you, Colin.
Thought you were really good on
You
the
know what
radio.
Collar's mad about? Collar's mad that Gary didn't watch the trenches in that Clemson game. He's very upset that this guy was watching the doggone ball
Actually,
because he should have been watching the trenches.
But think about this. He went up against two guys, and even though maybe Dexter Lawrence shouldn't have been picked as high as he was, but two guys picked in the first round in that game, and he was the better player. And that's what the Vikings, I'm sure, desperately wanted in Garrett Bradbury, is someone who can develop into a center that can match up with Akeem Hicks. Akeem Hicks dominated them last year. Hicks
a lot of
actually
guys
did,
inside did, Matthew.
but Hicks did more damage than Khalil Mack did to the Minnesota Vikings, and they needed to fix that interior lineman desperately, and they did that here tonight.
Beyond Mac, what's the next comp, do you think?
Well, Ryan Khalil and Jason Kelsey. Kelsey is kind of a different air. I mean, he is the best in my mind, but Alex Mack is right there. You're talking about rare athletic potential. And if you think about just this position, how rare it is that someone gets drafted as a center in the first round, it really doesn't happen all that often. And I remember
Not here, it hasn't.
when Dallas took
Travis Frederick.
it,
Yeah.
it was like, what? Who?
Mhm.
Why? Are they insane? And he turned out to be a really good player, but it just speaks to how rare it is that a center gets taken that high, unless that, maybe it's someone who ends up moving to center, but normally you don't see it. And that kind of tells you last year, for example, Frank Ragnow and Billy Price were taken 20th and 21st. And that I think was talked about as being a little bit unusual.